Hi friends, it's Lauren Taylor. Thanks for joining me in my craft room today for a Fandom Friday video. This is a project I created for Miss Ink Stamps featuring products from their magical collection. I'm going to be using a few of the new release products from the Magic Collection, including the Owl Stamp Set and Coordinating Dies and the Postage Seal and Shaker Dies. I'll also bring in a sentiment later on from the Magical World Stamp Set, and I'm going to use a mini Crest die. I've stamped out my images from the Owl stamp set in a brown alcohol marker friendly ink, and I'm using my Olo markers to color in my images. I'm going to be using shades of 7.7 as the darkest color for all of my owls, and I'm just adding that shadow where I think there would be shadow on my owl's feathers. So where their body tends to have some shadow, and then at the base of their kind of tail feathers, and then the top of their wings. Then I brought in the next shade, 7.3, to have a mid-tone to my coloring, and then the lightest color I'm bringing in 7.1. So I'm using that lightest color to completely color in my owl. There is quite a big jump between the different shades that I have here, so I will bring back that mid-tone and just extend that darker color into the lighter just to give my owl a little bit more of a blend when it comes to my coloring. Once I'm happy with how much I have on the feathers of my owl, I'll bring back in that lighter tone and color in the face. And then I'm going to bring back in the darker tone to color in the beak and its claws. After that, I brought in R0.2 just to add a soft little cheek to my owl. I like giving my critters pink cheeks. And then brought in the darkest shade to add a little bit of stippling and fun detail to the owls. And I did that for all of my owl images. For the letters, I'm using YO 2.0 and R 1.5 to color in the seal. I didn't do any shadowing or blending of my images for the envelopes. I just kept things really simple. Now, I really like the brown ink that I use for alcohol marker coloring, but it's just not as vibrant as I really want for this card. So I'm going to bring in Pinecone VersaFine Clear ink, and I have left my stamps in my MISTI, so I'm making sure my paper is right back in that same corner when I first stamped them, and I stamped the VersaFine on top of that. And you can see how it adds such a deep, vibrant line to the images. The reason why I don't stamp with that to begin with is because it's not an alcohol marker friendly ink, so I wouldn't be able to use my Olo markers with them. So I did that for all of my images. I even stamped out 10 more letters and colored them in. So I have 11 total, and those are going to be what fill my card. Using some red cardstock and the largest of the wax seal dies from the Postage Seal and Shaker collection dies, I went ahead and die cut the red cardstock to create a faux wax seal. I'm bringing in some blending brushes and distress inks in Lumberjack Plaid and Black Soot. So I'm starting with the red and adding some shadow to this red cardstock, but it's just not quite as deep enough in creating a shadow that I want. So after I get a layer of that Lumberjack red, I'm going to bring in that Black Soot just to darken it up a little bit more. I'm creating what I think looks like a shadow to the wax seal, so I wanted it to look real, so it has a little bit of a shadow and gloss to it, and I'll show you how I add a little bit more faux shine with a white gel pen when I'm all done assembling the card. So I'm layering my pieces together. So sorry, I'm a little off camera here. I'm just making sure I like how the shadow is placed. They do need to line up perfectly in my two pieces. So I'm trying to get my shadows to be similar on the same side, this smaller piece and the larger piece. And the reason that I cut the circle out of one of the kind of wonky shaped pieces is because when you use a wax seal, you're actually pressing into the wax. So I wanted the circular part to look like it was indented when it comes to layering my pieces together for the wax seal. I cut a piece of beige cardstock down to A2 in size, so 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and then I'm just cutting a triangle out of the other piece that I have from cutting my shape. And I did that by creating a score line at half of 5.5, so at 2 3/4. And I went up about an inch and then used that end of the score line to be the point where I would cut my triangle point. I wanted it to be a little bit longer than if I were to just cut it into 4 equal pieces or 2 straight lines from corner to corner. And I just thought an envelope usually has a larger flap when it closes, so I wanted to give that look. I use tea dye distress ink to ink up the edges of my A2 panel as well as what's going to be my envelope flap close. I really wanted this paper to look antique and distressed, like it's made the long journey from this magical school to the card receiver. So I realized that I don't like the look of the other flap of the envelope, look like it's missing. So in order to just kind of quick fix that, I'm using one of my scrap papers as a mask, like a stencil, and I'm just using some distress ink that's left over on my brush to give it a little shadow. And now it looks like there is a bottom flap on the bottom of my card or my envelope. I'm going to start layering my wax seal together. So I added liquid adhesive to the larger piece and I went ahead and put that right over where it looks like the envelope is closed. And then I'm adding the die cut circle part right on top of that, making sure I get those little wonky wax edges to line up together. I will realize when I'm all done before I take a photo that I wanted to add one of the mini crest dies, so I also die cut that out of red cardstock, distressed it a little bit on the edges, and adhered that to the center of the wax seal, but unfortunately I remembered it when I was taking photos, so I didn't get it on camera. Next, I want to arrange my owls and I want all of them to be holding a letter. So I have my little, my poor old owl in the bottom right-hand corner who already has an envelope in its mouth. So for the other ones, I went ahead and glued an envelope to the claws. The rest of the envelopes I'm just scattering around the card, and once I was happy with a layout, I have my sentiment stamp just kind of waiting to be stamped. I know I'm being very daring by not stamping that first, but I went ahead and glued down all of the envelopes that are not being held by an owl. And then I'm going to grab some foam adhesive and apply those to the back of all of my owls. So once I get plenty of foam that they're going to be stable, I'm going to peel off the release paper and attach those to the card front. After I have all 4 of those owls in place, I'll go ahead and grab my ink and a clear block so I can stamp my sentiment. I also have my card base ready to go. It's an A2 side folding card, but I've rotated it to be horizontal. So I have my stamp ready to go. It has a really adorable sentiment that I have from the Owls stamp set. Says, "I heard you're waiting for a letter." I just think it reminds me of the scene in the story where there is a young boy who is trying to get his acceptance letter and there's just a bunch of envelopes flying around, and that's the vibe I was trying to get for this card. I used my adhesive to glue this card down to my card base, and then I used a white gel pen to add some highlights to my owls and envelopes. And here you can see I'm using it to create a little bit of a waxy, glossy shine by just giving it a few little highlights around the center of my wax seal. So here's a close-up of how it looks. Again, in the final picture, you'll see one more addition. I do also stamp on the inside from the Magical World stamp set that says "Have a Magical Day," and you can see some close-up photos of the card, including the inside, over on my Instagram. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you'll click like, and if you're new here, I hope you'll subscribe and come back. As always, you can find everything I use down below in the description box. Thank you and have a wonderful day. Bye!